That's what I want to know. It's kind of a cool, wherever it is, it's somewhere cool. Yeah. So I'm probably not going to be able to get to all of your questions. And again, my name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger here at Katmai. But I'll be doing my best. Yeah.
Hey, can you?
Oh.
You stand there so I can get in the camera.
Actually, today it's going to be very informal, so we don't necessarily have one. We're going to be talking about 435, of course, since he's out there and we saw our nursing.
Hello everyone, this is Roy. I don't have a microphone on me. Mike's got the microphone. We're just working out some of the tech details again. We just made it over after a rather lengthy bridge closure. We're going to leave the microphone on, but there's going to be some buzzing. We're trying to get a handle on things here. And this will be just an informal chat and the sort of the naturalist notes approach where we just talk about some of the things that we're seeing in front of us. And we'll try to answer questions, but mostly it's for us to show you the stuff that we're seeing on camera.
Corner platform there in the upper elbow is stationary, eating a fish. Corner copies.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ranger Mike here at Katmai, and we are set up on the lower river platform, right where the sort of river watch cam oftentimes is broadcasting from. The main camera for the lower river is just kind of to my left. So the angle that you're going to get this afternoon for the next hour or so is going to be a little bit different. Right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 bears in my line of sight. There's a fifth one. Oh, yeah, I see it now. So I have 5 bears in my line of sight, and maybe some upstream that I can't quite see. The bear that you're looking at on the gravel is number 410. She's probably the largest adult female that we have here, and she tends to eat and sleep, not do too much of anything else. So her behavior is a little bit different than some of the younger, more energetic bears that we have around here. And she could be also the fattest bear that we have here right now. She's very, very big. So we're gonna, Roy and myself, we're gonna be doing this somewhat informally this afternoon, try to maybe get to a few questions here and there, but we also just want to try to bring some of the sounds to of Brooks Camp and the river to you. So there will be certainly periods of time where one or both of us are quiet.
Platform 67. Platform. It is clear to approach right now. However, there is a bear in the elbow that has begun to swim downriver towards the bridge. Copy that. I'll stop at lower parking.
So you're also going to be able to hear the radio from time to time as well too. So if you hear other voices, that's because my radio mic is keyed. So one really interesting bit of news that we can share with everybody today is that we did see the adopted yearling that Holly has been caring for nurse from her, right alongside of the Spring Cub. So if you're watching on explore.org and you're on one of the bear cam channels, then I'm going to, in just a second here, post a couple of photos that we got of that. I don't think it was in the cam's line of sight when it was happening. The cam was pointed in the right direction. The bears may have been visible, but I think they were hidden in some grass. So I'm going to post those right now. And you may have to, click newest on the top of the comment section to see those photos. And we were kind of speculating for a long time whether or not, what we saw was a true adoption or if it just happened to be, well, just Holly tolerating the yearling cub. But when you see it nursed, that definitely suggests that it is an actual adoption. You get a little bit of a taste of, sometimes how noisy Brooks Camp can be. You don't necessarily have always natural sound. We have a generator running that produces electricity. We have vehicles driving by, a lot of planes taking off as well.
I'm going to make a switch to the sound here for a second.
Platform, as you might be able to see, the bear in the elbow is moving upriver. Copy.
So out in the mouth of the lake right now is number 89. It's nicknamed Backpack. And he is the offspring of number 435 Holly. So he's the last cub that she happened to wean, at least that we know about. We haven't seen her with, well, she had one litter in between the one she has now and Backpack. But she ended up losing that cub, and I think that was in 2008. So as far as we know, she hasn't weaned any other cubs after 89 out here in the lake. A lot of times people are wondering how deep the water is out in the mouth of the Brooks River. And if you see a bear stationary and it's eating a fish, then it can touch bottom there. I don't think the bears are really good at treading water and eating fish at the same time. So if they're way out in the lake and they catch a fish, they're going to swim to a spot where they can touch bottom and then eat it from there. I'm not really sure where number 435 went to. She was out at the end of the lake, or at the end of the spit near where we are, but I don't quite see her at the moment. So she looks like she's wandered out of our line of sight. We don't know the sex of the Spring Cub. We know that the yearling that she adopted is a male, but we don't know the sex of the Spring Cub. As Grant, if you saw the chat we did with Grant Hildebrand yesterday about bears, you know, he was kind of joking that the Spring Cub doesn't seem to be too thrilled about the situation. Certainly with the size difference between the yearling and the Spring Cub, the Spring Cub's at a disadvantage. That bigger yearling could easily push the Spring Cub around. But they're probably going to go into the den together, all as one family. But again, we don't really know for sure. We've seen, you know, many sort of exceptions to the normal rules that maybe bears live by in the world. But you know, since Holly's caring for a Spring Cub, then it's quite likely that the yearling, since she's, you know, certainly adopted it, is going to go into the den with them. And if she comes back next year, it's likely that she's going to be caring for it at that time too.
This microphone is really picking up the plane noise.
So with Holly, I'm seeing, you know, kind of a lot of questions pop up into the chat window about her. We're on that topic. I guess I can kind of continue with that. We try to answer those questions. You know, people were asking if she's going to keep the yearling next year. Is she, you know, likely to den with the cub? And you know, I certainly think it's very, very likely that she's going to den with the adopted cub, just like she would with the Spring Cub. If she's brought it into her family, then I think she's going to just go about her business like that's her cub. So bears in Katmai typically keep their cubs for 2 to 3 summers. It seems like Holly casts off her offspring after 2 summers. So usually the way it works in the bear world, or at least with our brown bears here in Katmai, is that a mother will keep her cubs for 2 to 3 summers. She'll go to the den with them one more time. They'll all sleep in the same den for one more winter, and then in the springtime when they happen to emerge, that's when she drives them away. So since the Spring Cub is not likely to be driven off next year, that would be very, very unlikely, then yearling cub that was adopted is probably likely going to have another year with Holly. And that may give him a pretty big advantage. And they were resting over near number 410 not too long ago. Number 410 is a very tolerant bear of a lot of other bears, and actually very few bears will push her around. It's only the kind of the biggest adult males that will push her around. So she tends to be, of all the females that we have around here, maybe one of the more dominant females, if not the most dominant female. The plane that you're seeing right now is flying back to Homer for the day, so that brought a group of day watchers here to the Brooks River to see bears, and I think they got their fill. We're coming up on the denning season, of course. Bears don't nurse in the den after their first winter. So a spring cub that's newly born is going to nurse until they happen to come out of the den in May or June. But once they go back into the den and they're 10 months old, 11 months old, whatever it happens to be, then they're not going to be nursing. I remember reading one statistic that mother bear needs to produce about a quart of milk per cub per day when they're newly born to sustain them as they grow, especially in the summertime. So for a bear that's almost a year old, if it's going to be in the den, that's just too much energy for the mom to sustain throughout the wintertime. So the cubs that are going into the den now, the ones that you're seeing, running around Brooks Camp, they're going to be surviving on their body fat in the wintertime. And again, of course, there can be exceptions to this. There are, documented cases of bears nursing in the den as yearlings, but that is probably very, very rare. We're starting to see more and more bears arrive along the Brooks River. The bear numbers will continue to increase until the end of the month, and then in the beginning of October, that's when a lot of bears start to disperse. Food resources will start to decline along the river. They'll go maybe to another area where they can get one last salmon meal. Maybe they'll still try for some berries up in the mountains, and some of them may start to den in October as well too. So we'll have a lot of bears showing up throughout the rest of the month. We haven't seen the single spring cub that seemed to be separated from its mother in a few days, so we don't know of its whereabouts. I think it was last seen a few days ago, but I haven't seen it recently myself. We also haven't seen one of the bear cam favorites. We haven't seen number 489, Ted. And in my time here, he's been seen every summer. So Ted has not been seen. It's kind of not surprising in some ways, because if he was an older teenage bear, and when you're talking about brown bears, an average lifespan could be about 20 years or so. So he was kind of approaching that average lifespan. He could be deceased, could have found some other place to fish. I don't really know for sure. But with bears that have very regular habits coming back to the river each and every year, like he did, if he doesn't come back this year, then probably going to assume that he's deceased. But you never know. It could be surprised. It could be saying that, and then 20 minutes later from now, he'll become walking down the river.
We haven't had a very good track record this year of getting stuff right. It seems like we declare something one day, and the next day we're proven wrong. Talking about bears don't adopt cubs.
Yeah, it's extremely unlikely that this cub will find an adopted or a foster mother, and then what happens?
Like 2 days later, and we haven't seen it nursing yet, so it may not be an actual adoption, and then the next day. If nothing else, from watching these cams, you should learn that bears are bears. They will do whatever they feel like doing. They don't play by the rules that biologists think they are playing by all the time.
Let's see who's coming back towards us here. We got It looks like maybe, it's hard to tell just from the ears. Could be number 868 coming towards us, or it could be number 89. I have to wait for it to get a little bit closer to us. We'll get a better view.
Platform 632's new corner.
Awesome. Closest bear to the bridge is currently in the mouth of the river.
Are there any sleeping bears around me I should be aware of?
Not I'm aware of. 410 is sleeping on the spit. This bear is swimming upriver.
It's fine. You can hear the snorkeling noises. I've lost the bear.
It's one of the things that I do really enjoy about watching bears is you can
Platform.
hear, we can
Close.
hear them breathe. They sometimes will blow bubbles under the water, but most of the time they're exhaling.
You
Once
can
they,
hear it really well with
okay.
this.
Yeah, most of the time they exhale once they raise their nostrils above the water when they're snorkeling. So that bear's just chasing a little more of a lively fish, it looks like. I think I caught a glimpse of a scar kind of on its rear end on this one, so that would indicate to me that this is number 868. It's one of the, he's kind of nicknamed one of the Wayne brothers. He is a bear that was raised along the Brooks River here and comes back as an adult. So he's in his young teens, not particularly dominant. He's displaced by a lot of other bigger males up at Brooks Falls. And he's one of the few adult males that uses the mouth of the Brooks River. A lot of our adult males don't like to come down to the mouth of the Brooks River to feed. They just tend maybe not to like the activity that happens to be down here with humans and airplanes and everything like that.
Let's just listen for a second. We can hear him.
Platform looks like the bear has decided to start swimming back upriver towards the bridge.
Copy. We're halfway between corner and halfway.
It is between point and downriver island. Continuing coverage.
Perfect example of what they want to do.
Oh, we should be able to hear the. Oh, I thought we had a
They
fish.
dropped it.
Okay.
So
Must
that
have been
one,
a trout.
yeah, that one was probably a little too far gone for him. But we'll, yeah, if the bear comes close enough to us and starts eating a fish, maybe we'll be able to hear it crunch the bones too, which is something that you miss on the cam most of the time.
I might want to step on that side of you, Mike,
Okay.
because I am picking up the sound of the webcam. It's a little better over here.
So the bear right now is swimming right below the spot that we call the corner. And that's a little bit of a pinch point between people and bears. We often have close encounters in that spot. You can see people back down the trail. They're not particularly close to the bear. They're back down the trail to give it a little bit of space, and they'll move back up once it moves away.
we could take this noisy period here and see if there are any questions to answer. Because we can't hear the bear at all.
Okay. There's kind of a few at the place I stopped scrolling through on the in the comments section. We haven't seen number 469 this year, so you know typically he's a fall bear, and if he's going to show up, it's going to be at this time of the year. Last year was an anomaly based on his previous life history, so we'll wait and see if he happens to come back. We haven't seen kind of a lot of questions that I'm seeing just about sort of bear updates that people are looking for. 128 Grazer, haven't seen her. She doesn't always show up in the fall, so we typically don't get a chance to see her at this time of the year. But she has been seen here in the past in the fall, so that's something to keep an eye out for. I'm going to pan back out to the mouth of the river because 868 kind of moved out of our line of sight here. But we should be able to see some bears out now. If you're looking to tell the difference between number 89 backpack and 868, they are almost the same size, but 868 is definitely a bigger bear. Coloration is very similar in their fur. They both have blonde ears, but 868 right now does have a scar kind of on his rump. It's not in the same spot as Ted. I know sometimes there were false alarms about Ted sightings because of the scar that 868 had. But look for that scar. It's kind of really high up on his hip, almost towards his backbone or tail. And that's maybe one of the easier ways to tell them apart. And I think many people have been really fortunate recently to see some of these bears playing with one another. 89 in particular, he seems to be a pretty playful bear at this time of the year. And certain bears he seems to really enjoy playing with, like number 32. He may wrestle and play fight with another bear, and that's not uncommon for young, well-fed bears to play with one another. But that behavior likely will change as they continue to age and grow. I do remember in 2007 seeing Ted and Lurch playing together, and right now Lurch doesn't play with anybody. He is focused solely on himself, solely on dominating the food resources that he can find, focused on females too when the mating season is happening. Okay, now I think 868 is coming back into our line of sight.
Well, he had a fish, but
he dropped it. So we'll see if he catches another one here. He's a little bit closer to us, but he's on the other side of the bridge. So you'll see some pieces of the bridge in the camera's view. Looks like he's got a fish now. Maybe we'll get a chance to hear him eating.
Too much ambient noise to pick him up.
Okay.
I'm too far away.
Yeah, we'll try again. We'll see if some other bears want to swim by us. So he's slowly moving upstream away from us. Very typical behavior for bears at this time of the year, looking for just anything that can't swim away. A lot of fish are really kind of at their last effort of life before they happen to die. So if you do see a bear that's moving through the water down at the mouth of the river somewhat quickly, it's probably going after one of those fish that's just barely alive, just barely swimming away. If you get it, you know, if you're visiting and you have a chance to walk some of these salmon streams at this time of the year, you'll find fish parks everywhere. along the Brooks River. Oh, and he caught a fish, so we'll try to listen in, see if we can hear it. So we didn't consume that whole fish, it seemed like, just the skin. We got to hear a little bit of crunching in the bones.
And the peeling sound of the skin.
Oh, you got to hear that too,
Yeah.
okay. So I don't have headphones on, everybody. Roy does, so he's able to hear what the parabolic mic that we have is picking up. While we were listening to X8, you may have heard the gulls really start to call and become very, very active. That's because there was an eagle that flew over, and I think somebody was asking about the presence of bald eagles here along the Brooks River, and we see them. There's not a whole lot, but if you look for them and you're standing around, you can definitely find them. So juvenile eagles as well as adults. And one indicator to me to look for an eagle is if I happen to see the gulls that we have here just really fly up in the air, start to call very loudly, that usually indicates that there happens to be an eagle flying nearby. So that little surge from 868 there was him chasing after more live fish.
You just hear the gator.
Okay, so we have another vehicle coming by, so that's the noise you're going to hear. He's moving out of our line of sight. I may pan back to the mouth of the river because we still have bears that are visible over there.
Get me.
Oh, get Mr. Roy. Okay, he wants.
Push off my toys.
He likes the. He wants to make a cameo on the cam here.
Just so you can see the microphone that we're using for this. I don't know if it's too close, if I'm in there or not. But,
yeah, you're in it.
What we got is a microphone here. You can hear me scratching at it, that reflects or records the concentrated sound as it bounces off of this parabolic dish and into it. And it allows me to pull the sounds in from really, really far away. And it's also just an incredibly sensitive microphone, so it even picks up a lot of the ambient noise right around us. But it's outstanding at pulling in those signals from very far away. What it's not so good at is getting deep sounds because of the nature of sound. This dish cannot capture enough of the sound waves. It's too small to do that, so you lose the low frequency. So things tend to sound higher pitched on the cam because of this than they are in real life. And because of the nature of this, we won't get really deep guttural growl parts of a bear if they do happen to get in a fight. But it's outstanding for pulling those faraway sounds in close, and it's used a lot for birding because bird calls tend to be in the higher range that this microphone can pick up.
And if we wanted to, we probably could hear the people conversing on the other side.
Definitely
of the river,
can. So I have to be very careful to not point it directly at them because we could hear every word they're saying. Right now, they're just sort of a murmur in the background. Okay, you can pan out there.
Yeah, so our bears are kind of continuing to move up river, except for the ones that are out in the mouth. So we'll take a look and see who happens to be out there. So we still have number 410 sleeping. and her naps tend to be pretty long. There is some speculation that she's hard of hearing. I don't really think that's so true. I think she just doesn't care if we're making noise. She's a very human habituated bear. So what that means is that she's used to humans being a neutral stimulus in her world. We aren't anything good to her. We're not anything bad. We're just kind of like the gulls walking around. That's not to say that you can be close to her and be safe, because she could be defensive around us, and we have to make sure that we're just giving her room so she can go about her business. So habituated bears to people allow us really remarkable opportunities to view them in the wild and see them behave fairly naturally. But oftentimes it can pose a lot of management challenges as well, too. Number 410 sometimes will sleep right next to the trails. She sometimes will sleep right under the platform where I'm standing on. And when that happens, it's really difficult to move around those areas, because you don't want to purposely get close to a bear. You don't ever want to be close to them, but you certainly don't want to do it if you know that they're in the area.
She rolled over.
Yeah, she rolled over. I certainly think that she can hear things. Again, I tend to believe that maybe she just doesn't care too much how much noise we happen to make. Okay, and there's some other bears in the background too that are still swimming out there. I'll try to use my binoculars here and see if I can maybe identify them from a distance. I think the one that's in the view of the cam right now behind 410 in the lake that's eating a fish, I think that's number 89. I think that's Backpack. And let's see, there's another one swimming into view now up to the left of Backpack, and that's number 409, that's Bead Nose. And there's some gulls out there, but I think that's all I see for the time being. And it looks like those two bears in the lake are really close to one another. They're somewhat close, but again, very used to one another. Out in that environment, there's really not much of a need to defend your fishing spot, because the food is just scattered pretty much everywhere. And that's why we don't really see many confrontations between bears at this time of the year. If you were watching the Brooks Falls cam back in July, you saw a lot of bears displacing one another. So you saw one bear in the jacuzzi, for example, for a little bit, and then a very dominant bear come in and displace that other one. So that's very, very typical of what you're going to find in July, because there's only so many places that you can catch fish well up at Brooks Falls. But at this time of the year, the dead salmon are lying all through the river. So the bears are just sort of searching somewhat randomly in areas where they know that the salmon happen to collect. So it's actually pretty rare to see any fights at this time of the year. And fights overall really aren't that common to begin with. The bears would much rather posture and settle things just through some body language than actually physical fights. No, we actually haven't seen Ugly. I just got a question from our live audience here. So, yeah, no, we haven't. I mean, that was kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah, we've watched the camera, but we haven't seen him either. So.
Okay. Yeah, he was in a male in his teens, kind of seemed like in the prime of his life. Yeah, but he just didn't happen to show up this year. So, not quite sure where he happened to wander to, or if he happened to die for some reason. We just don't know. Look for him to show up. So he does come back in the fall, so maybe he'll come back this year. We'll continue to look like we're going to be looking for Ted, too. So.
And 469.
And 469. And all those other bears that people are wondering about, too.
Yeah.
So. We have seen some of the more dominant bears on the river here. A lot of you have seen 814 Lurch fishing up at Brooks Falls. We've also seen 747 here. We've also seen 856 here during the past week. And 856 is certainly the most dominant bear on the river, even above Lurch and 747. Even though those other bears are comparable in size, if not exceeding 856 in size, maybe 856 is just so dominant because of his disposition. He definitely seems to be a bit more aggressive around other bears. than 747, especially. 747 is just giant. He goes about his business and everyone leaves him alone, except for 856. 856 tends to want to show other bears who's boss, essentially. So he's repeatedly reminding the other bears that he is more dominant. So it's not only size that puts bears where they are in the hierarchy, it's also their disposition as well. So bear 409 swimming out in the lake there. It's pretty far away. There's not many bears very close to us. There's another bear upstream of us, but not necessarily any closer than what we're looking at now.
I imagine they'll all get close about the time we run out of battery power and it's time to go home. So we'll have a lengthy closure and no batteries to transmit from.
You know, when we were talking about dominance in the bear world, we had the Otis-a-thon, I guess it was called, last week, and that was interesting because I'm sure people were picking very high numbers of fish that Otis would catch and eat in a day, but his favorite fishing spot up at Brooks Falls was taken by lurch that day. So I think his catch rate was a bit lower because he couldn't sit in that spot and wait for the fish to come to him. He still probably caught plenty of fish downstream that were out of the cam's view, so maybe that day we didn't have a truly accurate count of how many fish he happened to catch. I actually picked 0 that day because I didn't, you know, I didn't think anybody was gonna pick that number. And if Otis isn't around and we're not counting the fish, then that's a 0 day. So
that's
I
the
was
sneaky
wrong.
Price is Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Attempt there.
Yeah, you underbid
Boo,
everybody
boo.
when you think they overbid.
Can you see anything out in the meadow over there? Those photographers are.
Yeah, I can actually.
I wonder if Holly has cut through the spit marsh.
Let me scan with my binoculars real quick. Let's see. No, I don't see anything over there right now. It's not to say there's not something over there that's out of my line of sight, but I can't quite see anything at the moment. When I'm out here on the wildlife viewing platforms, I'm constantly looking around. I'm looking behind me, I'm looking at, not, you know, to my sides, of course in front of me, and I'm listening very carefully too. I think it's really interesting to get to know this place, not only visually, but to get to know this place as far as sounds go. So sometimes I'll hear bears, sometimes before I happen to see them, especially if they're coming out of the woods behind me. I'm standing on the wildlife viewing platform, so that's a pretty stress-free situation. I'm standing on the corner on the other side of the river and I hear something moving through the woods. That's a different story. But maybe 409 here is going to swim into the mouth of the river, and we'll get a better view of her.
Whatever that spot that you're in, you pick up static.
Okay.
I don't know.
And I don't know.
I don't know what we're. If it's a just happens to be a Wi-Fi spot.
Yeah, I can stand a little bit further back from the cam. I hope.
Can you check, is the lower river east cam operating right now? Because if not,
yeah.
I'm going to go try to turn it off.
Yeah, hang on a second. And
Oh, no, just Tech Explorer. We should be able to get to it that way. Wish we had pandas here.
And if, in case people were wondering, Roy and I do watch some of the other cams on explore.org. So we have we found that the other ones have been quite interesting. So we're waiting for that page to load to see.
Because I think we are on River Watch right now. I just if this camera is on.
That's what people have been saying in the comments. That
Is it?
we're
Okay.
on River Watch.
Okay, well, I'm going to put the microphone down and I'm going to go see if I can turn that off because it really is quite noticeable.
Okay. Now I'm hearing myself on the camera, so that's always a little bit disturbing. So I'm going to turn that stream off for a little bit. So I do appreciate everyone's questions that you've been posting. There's so many that I'm certainly not going to be able to keep up. But keep posting them. Hopefully we'll try to get to a lot of them here and there. There's certainly going to be times where I'm going to be silent and I just want people to listen to the noise that's here. So 4-9's still out in the water there. 410 enjoying a very sunny spot to nap on the beach. 410 is a very interesting bear for a lot of reasons. Not only because she's very human habituated and we see her around the camp a lot, but she also fishes up at Brooks Falls in July. She's also extremely large adult female, so she's a pretty big girl at this time of the year. I think she might even be fatter than number 409. I'd love to see them side by side so I can get them in one picture together so I can have a more relative way of comparing the sizes. We haven't seen her with cubs in several years. I think the last time she had spring cubs might have been 2007, at least that we observed. In between then and now, there was a year where she came and she looked like she was nursing, but didn't have any cubs with her. So I don't know if she had cubs and of course lost them, or if that was just, if I was just incorrect in my my observation that she looked like she was nursing. We don't really know. But bears here in Katmai oftentimes need several years in between. We heard Grant yesterday talking about how the abundance of food definitely impacts the overall reproductive potential of these animals. More food means more cubs that they have at a more frequent rate, but they still definitely need sometimes many years in between, it seems like, to recover from just the physically taxing nature of raising offspring. And I do see one question that I can answer really quickly about if we've ever seen any moose here. And we do, but very rarely. Not a whole lot of moose in this area because they tend to, I think, avoid places where there are a lot of bears. But it was maybe a couple weeks ago I saw a really beautiful bull moose wade right across the mouth of the Brooks River where the camera is pointed right now. I'm not sure if anybody really got any screenshots of that. Maybe I'll try to post them later. I don't have them, those photographs with me though. If you're hearing an engine, that's our Valley of 10,000 Smokes bus tour. And this may have some of our Katmai Bear crazies on it right now. If you ever come to Brooks Camp and you want to go see the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, this is the bus that you'll ride on. So I'll give you a view of that. Let's get back to some bears out here in the mouth of the river. And you can see that bus came in, and the bus is, oops, sorry, I bumped the camera. Bus came in, and 410 didn't react at all. So she's very, very used to engine noise. Not all bears, of course, are going to be so casual around engines and people noise, but she certainly is. Sometimes you'll see bears laying on the beach too, and they looks like they're breathing hard. They could just be panting. They could just be hot. So after 410 happens to get up, I imagine she'll be quite warm, since there's a lot of sunshine on her. She'll probably want to go right into the water for a dip. Oh, someone was asking about if we've seen the bear that had the wire snare around her neck. Saw her a few days ago. I think it was Sunday morning that we ended up seeing her, and it was right from this platform that I happened to see her. So she was around, looking healthy, looking good. And it kind of leads into another question that I see in the chat, is that, are these bears ever at risk of hunting? And the reason why I bring this up is not because people are trapping for bears inside of the park, but the bears at Brooks Camp here have the potential maybe to wander outside the park boundaries. It's probably pretty unlikely given the food resources that we have around here, but 854 Divot, who had the wire snare around her neck, likely got that snare around her neck outside of the park, because that's where she was photographed with it. So we know she was outside of the park. We know she got probably where she got the snare. So some of these bears will wander outside of the park boundaries from time to time. And that's another thing that we have to consider when we're close to these animals. Sometimes these bears will habituate to people in specific circumstances. Like, for example, adult males up at Brooks Falls. They'll habituate to the presence of people on the wildlife viewing platform, but we don't see them come down to the mouth of the Brooks River. So they're not used to, or don't want to be around people when people are on the ground, making noise and being active. Other bears, though, like some of these adult females that frequent the area down around the mouth of the Brooks River, they're probably very tolerant to people wherever they happen to encounter them. So if we are viewing bears up close, there could be potential consequences for that. And the park has had some conflicts between bear watchers and hunters in years past up in Katmai National Preserve, where sport hunting is allowed. So still 3 bears out there, including the number 410 sleeping. And I'm going to pan upriver. We haven't looked upriver in a long while, so I'm going to pan up there. See if we can find anything. I'm not sure any bears are in the line of sight up there, though. So there's just one bear, and it's very far away. You might not be able to see it. It's actually just behind the willow that's blowing. And I like how many of you have adopted the name of that area as the Leaning Spruces, since we don't have any pines here in Katmai. People were calling it the Leaning Pines for a long time. Okay, let's swing back to the mouth where we can get a better view of some bears. If anybody's looking for, again, some citizen science projects, an interesting thing for everyone to do is to take screen captures of the water levels at the mouth of the Brooks River, maybe every day, every week, every month, whatever you happen to, however often you want to do it. But the lake level fluctuates considerably from spring to fall, and it also fluctuates from year to year too. So it's not always at this level seasonally. It doesn't always reach this height, depending on how dry a year it is. In some years we have a lot more rain, a lot more snowpack in the mountains, the lake level can be much, much higher. And that affects the dynamic of the bears and the salmon too, because when we have more water, especially early in the salmon run, like back in June and early July, when we have a lot of water, then bears have a very, very difficult time fishing at the mouth of the Brooks River, and they can typically only catch fish well upstream. But in years when we have large runs of salmon and low water conditions, then a lot of bears may find fishing success down here. Bears do swim across their lake occasionally. Doesn't happen very often. But they're very strong swimmers. They float very well with all the body fat that they have on them. They don't tend to get cold because they are so well insulated and so massive. And sometimes people often wonder about that too. Like, don't the bears get cold? And I've seen bears shake almost like they're shivering. I'm not sure if it is actually shivering, so they probably can do that. They probably can shiver, but they're so massive that they usually just don't cool down very well. If you want to compare like the surface area that a mouse has in the ratio to its volume, a mouse has a lot of surface area compared to its volume. Bears are kind of the opposite. They have very little surface area compared to their overall volume. So larger objects take longer periods of time to cool down. And that's why the bears, and one of the reasons why the bears can tolerate the cold water so well. So while we have still a few quiet moments here, one question that I see in the comment stream on Explorer is, why do you think males don't want to be around, their families, the cubs that they happen to sire? Not unlike a pride of lions. It's bears just seem to have evolved a different survival strategy than dogs, for example. Like a pack of wolves or felines like prides of lions. Their best survival strategy for the males seems to be, sire as many offspring as you can, but leave after that and let the mother take care of the offspring. We don't know why that typically, or why that has evolved the way it has. Maybe it's a factor of competition for food. When you have two big adults hanging around in the same area, especially in areas where food resources are limited, it could be pretty difficult for all of the bears to happen to find food. So maybe it's better that the adult males happen to wander away where they're not perhaps directly competing with the females, their mates, for food. Of course, here at Katmai, the dynamic is a little bit different, just because there is so much food that is around here. Bears at Denali, other parts of interior Alaska, in the Yukon Territory, going down into the Rocky Mountains, into Yellowstone, those bears are dealing with much, much more limited food resources than we have here. Bears are living large in Katmai in many ways because they can get so many food resources.
No, they were yearlings, so usually they come out with some up. So we're not really sure how many survived. We think probably 2 of the 3, because early in the spring we saw 2 young so would all kind of hang out together. So it was probably, but that's just kind of guesswork. But no, that's kind of normal. Sometimes the team could do something, but usually kick them out to do something. So I'm gonna keep scanning here, sorry. Still listening. New cubs. Yes, I heard one yesterday. One spring cub that I haven't seen yet. So yeah, we've got a spring cub, we've got Holly with her 2 cubs, we have Divot 854 with her cub, we had a mother pass through with 3 spring cubs, and we had, let me see something.
Now last year you had a big male that had an injured hip.
And kind of a follow-up question on the comments I had about the river levels and the lake levels and looking for that. I think over time, you know, every once in a while the cam's going to zoom out like I just did, and you're going to get these kind of wide-angle views of the mouth of the Brooks River. Those are probably times when you can just grab a quick screen capture to compare water levels over year to year and season to season.
So it's possible he can come this year, it's possible something happened to him.
He was interesting last year because he was still tough enough till he had a pretty decent fishing spot. They challenged him on a new ball up fight.
Yeah, he's sort of maybe slipping down a little bit on the hierarchy, but he's definitely a little bit of a big bear. He's around, so we didn't really see him this year.
So no bears close to the bridge. We had a hard time getting across the bridge to start the chat.
That can happen.
But since that time, the bears have sort of dispersed, which makes it good for the convenience of people going back and forth because they can walk across the bridge. However,
Not last year and also not this year.
for the sake of, you know, up close and personal bear watching during the chat here is maybe not so great. If you're not familiar with some of our rules that we have here at Brooks Camp, people need to remain 50 yards, and that's about 46 meters from any bear. And anytime that a bear is within that distance of the bridge, then we close the bridge down, not only to keep people safe, because bears can climb on the bridge, but also to give bears space to make sure that we're not interfering with their movements.
From fighting, also from recording the meetings.
All right, let me check in the comment stream here, see if I can answer a few more questions while we got still some quiet time. We do get repeat visitors here every year, but not too many. For many people, visiting Katmai and visiting Brooks Camp is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity because this is such an expensive place to visit. So it's cost prohibitive for a lot of people. A lot of people just don't like to travel this far.
Sometimes it feels that way.
It can sometimes be difficult for people to come if your mobility happens to be impaired. So there can be a lot of barriers to prevent people from coming and visiting Katmai National Park, and that's why the webcams, I think, are so valuable, because we can try to bring some of this experience to you. But as far as people coming to study, we have some people coming to study the bears here at Katmai, not, I think, as many as maybe the opportunities allow, however. So if there are any potential graduate students who are doing work in wildlife biology and you want to do some work on bears, the Brooks River can be a great place to visit. Somebody else was asking about the Adams River, you know, and whether the run of salmon there is comparable. And I'm not familiar with that river. I'd have to look it up on Google to answer that question. You know, in many places of the world, you don't have gatherings of bears like we do here on the Brooks River. This phenomenon happens in many places where you have very concentrated food resources. It happens in a lot of other places in Katmai National Park. Happens in the McNeil River, State Game Sanctuary and Preserve just north of Katmai. Happens in places like Lake Clark National Park. Some places on the Kenai Peninsula get lesser numbers of bears along salmon streams. Places on Kodiak get large gatherings of bears, and that continues all the way down into British Columbia. In areas where you don't have perhaps as many bears gathering around runs of salmon, maybe the habitat away from those salmon streams just isn't that great. Here in Katmai, especially on the Pacific coast of the park, if there's no salmon, the bears can probably still find a lot of stuff to eat. So bears are very, very reliant on salmon, but there are many, many other food resources available to these animals. So if the habitat, away from the salmon streams isn't comparable in some of those other areas, that could explain why you don't have as many bears. Bears are also slow to reproduce. They are slow to recover from population declines over time. And that could be another reason why as well.
Is that construction noise?
Yes.
Is that what I'm...
Yeah.
It's just coming from everywhere in my ears.
So if you're hearing some construction noise there, we're building a new landing for our barge road. And some of you have seen the barge on the cam before, but that's down on the lake shore. This is a spot where there's a lot of bear and human conflicts because we're trying to offload equipment, bring fuel out. Anything that's too big to be flown in is brought in by barge. And that's where it's landed for decades. But with increasing numbers of bears along the Brooks River and other projects going on out here, there's a place where it can be difficult to load equipment disturbing animals. So they're moving that landing into a place that's further down the lake shore, not very far, maybe just a quarter mile or so. But the further away from the salmon stream you happen to move, the bear numbers drop down fairly exponentially. So it's actually really, really quick. You get away from the bear activity fairly quickly as you're moving away from the river.
I was hoping the gull would jump and do that again, but got what it was going for.
Yeah, the gulls, oftentimes you'll see them act somewhat like terns. They're fairly closely related to terns if you want to look at the taxonomy of gulls and their physical structure. But gulls are certainly more of a scavenger than terns. But you will see them sometimes, the gulls dive into the water to try to get something that's underneath, but they're not really good at getting underneath the surface of the water itself. These birds certainly benefit from the presence of bears. If bears weren't here catching and killing salmon, the gulls would have a much harder time getting access to the salmon itself. So the bears are vectors, essentially, for dozens of animal species. The bears will catch and kill salmon much, much earlier in the year than these animals could gain, or that allows these animals to gain access to the salmon itself. And this sort of cascade extends from bears to birds. It extends even into the aquatic invertebrates that are in the stream as well. Even caddisfly larvae will colonize, bear-killed salmon carcasses weeks or sometimes even a couple of months before they would become available otherwise. So it looks like we still have number 89 swimming out there in the mouth of the river. Number 409's out there too. Bear 410 still sleeping. So not too much has changed as far as our bear activity goes.
I just turned off this microphone because all I'm really getting is
Okay.
construction noise at the
Okay.
moment.
So yeah, we have our parabolic mic off right now. And if anybody's, kind of a logistical question about operating things here at Brooks Camp, if you happen to see a car driving down the road, that car was brought here across the lake on on the barge. So anything that's too big to be flown in can't be driven here. It has to be brought across the lake. And when we're doing these sort of informal chats and we have the parabolic mic, if we ever get, bears interacting with one another, we're definitely going to try to pick up those sounds, the woofing that they make. There could be perhaps some growling, perhaps even jaw popping as well too. We're not going to be able, excuse me, we're not going to be able to recreate those noises all that well.
Hey, Mike, I'm going to see if I can get this bear eating. It's
Okay.
close. It still may be too noisy.
So it's going to be behind us. It's out of our camera's line of sight. So.
And he's done. I think we got one chew.
It's a very noisy bear. That's 879.
And it was pretty noisy over there with the people on the platform, so it may not have been very noticeable.
If he comes, he may swing around here. I'm going to move the camera upstream of the bridge. Yeah, when he surfaces from his snorkeling and he picks a sound up above the water, it's very, very noticeable. One of the noisiest bears here, I think, just as far as his breathing goes. It looks and sounds like he's really enjoying the fish when he happens to be eating it. He's not quite into our line of sight yet.
I can hear him now.
Okay. So I can hear him, and I don't have a parabolic mic, so everyone at home should be picking up some of that sound of him exhaling. So he's coming into our line of sight now. Just on the other side of the bridge. .879 does not like to go underneath the bridge. Seems like most bears will, or many bears will, but he does not, even in places where it's certainly deep enough for him to do that. so we caught a fish. We'll be able to hear him eating from here.
Yeah, right here, but that was
So we're done with this fish.
It sounded pretty good here. I wonder, can people see it on there?
Yeah,
Any comments?
I haven't refreshed, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so people did hear him chewing.
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I can hear the bear chewing.
So he's still moving upstream out of our line of sight. We're probably going to lose the sound from him in just a second here, if not already. In the meantime, what I saw happening is I saw a 409 bead nose get out of the water near the corner and go into the woods over there and not come back out. And at this time of the year, she gets out of the water after a long swim. She's going in there to sleep. I'd be surprised if we see her coming back out of there anytime soon. So where she went in was just on the edge of the river on the other side, over in that vicinity. So she's out of my line of sight right now. I can't quite see her. I'm imagining that she's going to go in there and try to find a comfortable place to rest. So it's 4:30 now. We're just tuning in. My name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger here at Katmai. And we're just doing a sort of an informal chat, talking about things that we happen to see, answering a few questions that get posted in the comment stream on explore.org. We still have Bear 89 backpack out in the mouth here eating fish. So the bird that you just heard calling was a glaucous-winged gull. Those are the most common gulls that we have, and probably all the gulls that you're seeing in the Thames View right now are glaucous-winged. We can have large numbers of mew gulls here. Mew gulls just like a cat mews. And then we can have lesser numbers of Bonaparte's gulls here. Maybe a few other things as well. I've even seen some black-legged kittiwakes show up around here, herring gull show up around here, glaucous gull show up around here. So at this time of the year, especially when things are migrating, you can have a chance to see a lot of different stuff. But the calling of the glaucous-winged gulls, those are one of the sounds that I associate with Katmai, especially summertime Katmai.
So Mike, if they're all different colors, how can they be the same bird?
Well, you're looking at adults with the white and the gray wings, and then you're looking at juveniles that are kind of sooty in color or brown. The gulls, many species of them, and especially the glaucous-wings, they can be like eagles in that they need sometimes 3 to 4 years before they reach before they become fully mature adults. So some of those birds that you see out there that are sooty in color, they could have been just fledged this year. Other bird song or calls that I'm hearing mallards, black-billed magpies. Not really going to be hearing a lot of songbirds at this time of year, though, because most of those have already moved on to warmer climes.
I see something at the corner.
Oh, you see a bear over there, maybe?
Yeah. Or a person looking for a bear.
Or a person looking for a bear. Okay.
I don't know. I could just see some movement.
Okay, we'll take the cam over there and try to give you a little bit of insight into how we manage people here at Brooks Camp and bears.
Set it down here.
It was Lisa looking for it.
Okay.
Stand by.
So one of the issues that we've run into here at Brooks Camp for a long, long time is that the camp is not well designed for the way it's used. Brooks Lodge here was established in 1950 as a place to come in and catch fish. It was designed as a sport fishing lodge at first. When they first opened in 1950, they're not really...
Set it down approximately halfway between
I'm going to pause
Bear
here for a
Trail and Corner, and it's basically at the tree line. It's right in that their blind spot just off the point.
Let me know what your plan is.
Yeah, so Brooks Lodge was established in 1950 as a sport fishing camp with a few amenities for people who wanted to come in, but this was just a tremendous sport fishing river, even back then, and still is today. This area became part of Katmai National Monument, however, in 1931. So this was part of the National Park Service and Park System for a long, long time. Since then, however, people have started to come to the Brooks River for much different reasons than originally. In the 1950s, almost everybody who came here was coming for sport fishing, and that started to really change in the 1960s and 1970s, and today almost everybody comes to Brooks Camp to watch bears. However, our facilities are located in just perfect bear habitat. So we have our trails and places where bears like to sleep. We have our buildings and areas where bears like to walk and sleep. Our facilities are located right on top of the river. So the way that this place is designed lends itself, unfortunately, to bear and human conflicts. And the park is trying to correct some of those things, but we're always going to have some level of bear and human conflicts here just because of how close we are to the food resources that the bears rely upon. So this situation that we have in the woods over here right now, you heard Lisa, who's one of our bear technicians, describe where the bear is. That's quite a common situation, very close to the trail over there, kind of right on the edge of the woods. In many cases, we just try to give the bears time to go about their business, and then we will try to move around them as necessary.
pretends awake. Or she's sleep scratching.
And I think somebody earlier today posted a question about whether or not bears dream. And I think we got that question last year too.
Yep.
And I don't think we were able to
We said they
answer
dream of
that.
salmon.
They're just as smart as dogs. We have a pretty good idea that dogs will dream. So with an animal as intelligent as bears, it would be quite likely that they dream as well too. There are a few other, bird questions and animal questions, non-bear related. We see many different types of mammals here in Katmai besides bears, of course. There are moose here, there are caribou, many species of weasels are here, everything from the least weasel all the way up to wolverines. River otters, of course, is included in that family. Lemmings, voles, jumping mice, and marine mammals too. Certainly, they use the waters off of Katmai National Park. So on the Pacific coast, it's not uncommon to see whales, sometimes a pot of orcas going through.
Sea otters.
Sea otters, yeah, definitely a lot of sea otters in the waters right off of Katmai.
A variety of seals.
Porpoises. Yeah, stellar sea lions, harbor seals. I don't know if you can hear the chickadees behind us over here.
We had a walrus in the Naknek River.
That's right.
Just above the dock where the float plane takes off.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of the Naknek River cam, there was a dead walrus that washed up there, and sometimes we can see seals swimming in the water there. Lots of bird species come here to breed, not many stick around in the wintertime. We'll have bald eagles here all year. Chickadees will be here all winter, redpolls, some northern shrikes.
Snow buntings.
Yeah, some snow buntings will come down to the lower elevations in the wintertime. Right now, if you want to find snow buntings, you got to go up into the high mountains. Go up into the head of the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, for example, and you can find snow buntings there. And we see a lot of golden eagles here, or excuse me, a lot of bald eagles. Very, very few golden eagles, however. I've only seen maybe 2 golden eagles over the past 7 years here. So they're around, but we don't
You
really
pick
see
up the
very
camera?
many.
I think you can pick it up and...
Yeah, let me move some
because
things
he's
out of
right
the way.
here. You're okay.
Okay. So there's a bear right behind us. We're going to try to turn the cam and not knock anything over, so...
You're okay, just walk. One cable's caught.
Okay. We're about to the spot now where we can see the bear right behind us. It'll give you a little bit of a different perspective on our wildlife viewing platform. So this is really kind of the backside of the lower river platform. A couple of the people standing over there are some of the avid bear cam watchers that will go unnamed at this time. But this is bear 879.
It's unfortunate it's one of the more noisy periods too. You can't hear him walking through the grass.
Yeah, we just had one of the
2 planes.
Yeah, a couple planes take off. So I don't know how long he's been fishing either, but this is pretty typical of bears at this time of the year. They're going to be fishing for a few hours and they're going to go into the woods and nap for a few hours.
Cannot get a break with the noise right now. It's the 3rd plane taking off. Everybody always on the cams wants to know why we don't have the sound on. And this is really a lot what it would sound like throughout the whole day. So it's a very, very noisy place, at least this time of the year.
Yeah, if you live next to a small airport, you know what we're talking about. Looks like he's moved off there. So we'll maybe move the cam back to where we were.
Let me get these cables out.
Okay. So we'll make you see here for just a few seconds.
Do you want to switch up on the camcorder? Switch the input this one to just one.
And in the meantime, when we were looking at 879, 410 did get up, and she's in the water right now. Kind of looking underneath the water, but maybe cooling down too.
Looking across, this keeps rain and wind wakes up, it'll be
Like how much is 879 weigh?
879, he's a big guy. He's going to be probably in the 700-800 pound range or more. It's hard for me to tell. He's not the biggest bear that we have here, but he's certainly a big bear. I'd imagine probably someone like 747. That's probably the biggest bear that we have here as far as weight goes. Maybe not as far as height or length, but as far as weight goes, he looks to be like the thickest that we have. Yes. Yeah, I saw him a few days ago, so he's around. Yeah.
I haven't seen him yet in September. I don't know if I'll recognize him.
I haven't seen him out of the water yet. I was hoping to see him out of the water because he is so massive. But they're so big right now. I'm not sure that they want to get out of the water because it's much. Exactly. Into the woods over here.
He was walking very slow.
He's a slow guy. He doesn't really know that.
He wanted everybody to take a picture of his behind.
And let's see, 410 has not moved over here, so this definitely looks like she's cooling off from her nap.
From the strenuous act of napping.
And oftentimes, when they're sleeping on exposed like that to the sunshine, they get really hot. They have a lot of digestion going on in their gut too. So there's a big sort of, it's not like a ruminant, it's not like a fermentation tank in that sense, but they're big animals with eating a lot of food, so they're producing a lot of body heat.
It just sounded kind of funny.
I'm sorry, sir.
What species are most of the ducks that are around?
Most of the ducks that I happen to see either are mallards. We have green-winged teal here, so if you see a really small dabbling duck flying by, it could be a green-winged teal. Common mergansers are pretty abundant as well too. So if you see a small armada of ducks all diving together, that could be common mergansers. Common goldeneyes are pretty abundant here as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so 410's the one closest to us here, and I think it's number 89 out at the edge of the lake there. Yeah, that he just laid down. So it's nap time for a lot of the bears. It's time for a siesta. 410 just got done with her siesta, so maybe she'll go fishing now. But we have a bear still sleeping on the other side of the river, and of course bears sleeping around us too. So it's about 4:47 according to my clock here. So if you're listening to me on explode.org, we're probably going to go to about 5 o'clock or so. I think we have enough
We have 20 minutes.
battery life, so we should be okay with that. And we're just doing sort of an informal chat here for another 10 minutes or so. Trying to talk about things that we happen to see happen around us, catch some of the sounds that you don't get a chance to hear by watching the cams, and maybe answering a few of your questions too. speaking of sounds, somebody, Stacy was asking, what do the bears sound like when they're play fighting? And they really don't make a lot of noise. Preceding an actual fight, there will be a lot of growling, a lot of vocalization. Preceding a play fight, they just sort of walk up to one another, maybe they'll nuzzle a little bit. But when they're play fighting, it just sounds like flesh slapping against one another. Sometimes you'll hear them breathing pretty heavily. You can hear the sounds of their mouth, kind of biting into one another, the water splashing, but it's essentially a silent activity.
Earlier in the morning, there were a couple young bears play fighting, and you basically just heard the branches breaking.
Oh yeah, that's something I forgot to mention as well too. Yeah, when they're in the forest doing that, they're busting stuff up all left and right. You get a couple 700-pound bears wrestling, and it's going to leave a mark on the forest for sure.
You just heard the branches.
That's something I forgot to mention as well too. Yeah, when they're in the forest doing that, they're busting stuff up all left and right. You get a couple 700-pound bears wrestling, and it's going to leave a mark on the forest for sure.
They were completely silent. Like sometimes dogs are when they are play fighting. Like some dogs fight loud, some play fight.
I've actually never seen or heard play fighting bears be noisy. Yeah, it seems like within my experience at least, they've been pretty quiet. I've been surprised a lot by different bear behaviors this summer, so I'll be listening, I think, a bit more carefully now that people are kind of curious about it.
Drive this camera and then talk and use that microphone to pick up sounds. Have you watched the cameras on the internet? It's at explore.org. Okay. And so he's answering questions of people on the internet about things that they're seeing. He has a microphone, so he's tied right in.
A sort of logistical question about Brooks Camp here. If you're camping in the campground, there is 2 vault toilets inside the electric fence. You do not need to leave the electric fence to go to the bathroom. So if anybody's planning a trip to Brooks Camp, rest assured there is a bathroom within the electric fence down there.
Sometimes it's hard to find it in the dark.
Yeah, yeah. If you're coming in September, definitely bring a light with you.
Actually, it's useful to have a light when you're camping at any time, because inside the huts and inside the toilets it's dark.
That's true. That's true. We don't really have any very dominant bears in view, except for 410. As far as females go, she's a pretty dominant bear, and again, she's just relaxing in the water there. And she's active. She's sort of sniffing. I'm looking through my binoculars at her right now. I'm not particularly sure how long bears keep their level of dominance. I'm actually curious to find that answer out. And over the past few years, I've been keeping track of the hierarchy of bears along the Brooks River, especially at Brooks Falls in July, because that's when I happen to see most of the interactions. So anytime that I happen to see a bear displace one another, or a bear avoid another, a bear perhaps mate with another one, I will make a note in my notebook, and then I kind of dump all that stuff into a database and kind of crunch the numbers that way. And I don't have anything published, so everyone's just going to have to take my word for it. But over the past several years that I've been doing this, 856 is clearly the most dominant bear. He does not get displaced by other bears. And he's in his mid-teens right now. And I guess 410 was too hot, and she just wanted to sit back down.
I'm going to switch batteries.
Okay.
So we're going to lose signal for a certain amount of time. But I'd rather have a fresh battery in, even if we stop around 5. In case something starts to happen and we don't want it to die in the middle. I may have to restart the whole thing. It says it's going live. Let me see it.
Okay, so bear with us, everybody, if you're still listening. We just switched out a battery. We just want to make sure that we're live before we continue. So it appears that we are still live.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
says it's broadcasting. I just want to make sure
Okay.
that it comes through clear. That may have been the pause right there where we switched. Try refreshing and see what happens.
Oh, it's going again. So we saw 410 lay down over there, and that sort of broke my train of thought. But I was kind of answering a question about how long bears retain a high level of dominance in the bear hierarchy. And yeah, again, I'm curious to know that answer. We see bears along the river sort of attain a really high level of dominance in their mid-teens. So 14, 15 or so, that seems to be an age where they really attain a high level of dominance. And they hold a pretty high level of dominance all the way until the end of their lives, it seems like. But there's always younger bears that are coming into that prime age of their life, 13, 14, 15, and looking to displace some of those other bears that were formerly very dominant. So I'm curious to actually, put some real hard numbers in. I'm curious to really try to understand this with some hard numbers. So during the time that I'm here, I'm planning on trying to keep track of that hierarchy, and maybe over a few years I'll get a pretty good idea of at what age bears gain a really high level of dominance. Because we know so much about our bears on an individual level, we have a really good estimate on almost every bear's age and how long they happen to hold that dominance level. So that may be a question that I'll try to answer in a few years. And I can only speculate right now, but I'll try to put some hard numbers to it in the future.
Just fishermen.
Roy, where are you going for the wintertime?
That's the question.
Well, it's a question someone is asking about me, but I was going to deflect it to Roy.
Well, I don't know yet. I'll probably try to take 2 trips, and both someplace warmer than here. But I don't have any plans yet. I've got to get to Australia soon, but I don't know. I don't know if this is the year for Australia or next year.
Yeah, and I'm probably, I'm going to be in King Salmon most of the winter, so if people are wondering what happens to me after Brooks Camp sort of closes for the season, I'll be out here until the middle of October, then I'll go to King Salmon, and I'll be working out of the park headquarters there, and I'll be planning a couple of vacations as well, too. I have somewhat of an idea of where I'm going to go, but I think I'm going to keep that location a secret for now, because I'm not quite sure. This has, been a fairly quiet afternoon as far as bears go. We do have bears, as you can see, taking a lot of siestas right now. But you always have to be fairly aware of your surroundings here. A bear like 410, fairly tolerant to the presence of people, but you don't want to stumble upon her. You don't want to happen to surprise her. You don't want to put yourself in a situation that's unsafe or dangerous. And there's never any guarantee of safety in bear country. There's one question asking if anyone has ever been killed by a bear here, along the Brooks River, and no one has been killed by a bear here along the Brooks River. In fact, we've had very, very few instances of people being injured by bears. The last 2 instances where people were injured by bears, those were pretty minor incidents. And when you want to talk about the nature of the injury, one child was actually run over by a running bear, just couldn't get out of the way fast enough, and the kid was knocked out of his shoes. And then a ranger was charged in the mid to late 1990s. I can't remember the exact year, and it happened. And she happened to get some injuries to her hand, but that has been it, except for one other instance at the end in the campground by a bear in the middle of the night, and that was the most serious incident. But since that time, since the 1990s, we have not had anybody injured by bears. We have a lot of close encounters that happen all the time, just because at Brooks River here, you're pretty much free to go almost anywhere you want to. Now that doesn't mean that you're not going to run into bears just because you can walk around, because you are, if you're going to walk the river, especially at this time of the year or in July, you're going to run into bears. But overall, this is a fairly safe experience, especially if you're giving bears space to move about on their own. So what are we looking at now, Roy?
The mountains.
Okay, so we're looking at a few of the mountains of the Aleutian Range, and that might be a good view to conclude the the chat with. Some of those snowfields that you see over there are covering some glaciers. They're just barely in our line of sight here. But just on the other side of those mountains is the Pacific Ocean. So if you were to go due east from here and due south from here, you run into the Pacific. And that, for people who live in the continental United States, that can be somewhat hard for you to wrap your head around. Here at Katmai, we're far enough west that you got to go south and you got to go east to get to the Pacific Ocean.
How far west are we?
We are, if you are looking at the longitude of the Earth, we are due north of the Big Island of Hawaii. So if you wanted to pinpoint Brooks Camp on a map, and like if you use Google Earth, and then you know, put a little mark where Katmai happens to be, and then put a mark right where Mauna Loa happens to be on the Big Island, we're very, very close to one another. So we're surprisingly far west. It doesn't often seem like that on a map, but we definitely are very, very far west.
Yeah, because most of the maps, they put Alaska down off the coast of Southern California or Mexico.
Yeah, they fit it where they can, even though we're a third as big as Alaska's a third as big as the lower 48. So it is 5 o'clock, and I think, you know, Roy and I are going to kind of get ready to cross back over the bridge once there's an opportunity to do so.
This on, but we'll turn the microphone off.
So yeah, we'll have the camera running. If we see something interesting, we might jump back right on.
Yeah, since we're not going anywhere.
So yeah, Bear in the Woods over there is blocking our line of travel for the moment. So we're going to stay here. We'll be driving the cam, but I hope everyone enjoyed the informal chat that we had here today. And I apologize for scooping myself. I didn't really know that we were live right at the beginning when I told you what I was going to talk about it with Holly. But
did people hear it?
I'm not sure if people did or not. But,
okay.
Yeah. So.
He was so excited.
I'm very, very interested in that story. It's a very, very fascinating story overall. But Roy and I will be back online at some point in the near future to answer more questions and keep you informed about all of the interesting pieces of the bear world that we happen to observe here along the Brooks River. So in the meantime...
And we were going to ask them about, would they prefer a couple of hours of this or a couple of hours of dedicated answering questions, typing them in?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so...
I don't know if they can hear me. You might want to...
Okay, yeah, so before we go, one question that Roy and I want to know is, if you want to, you know, us to continue with some of these informal video chats that we have, or would you rather have myself or Roy or maybe even Ranger Gene, you know, dedicate, you know, maybe 3 hours of our time to chat with you in the comment stream on explore.org, going to the bottom of the page in the discuss section and talking with you there.
And it's not an either or. It's just sometimes we think, would they rather us go up there and ramble on for 2 hours, or would they rather us give them nice, concise, well thought out, you know, written?
Okay, there's advantages to both of these things. When we're doing the video chats like this, we can maybe jump on really interesting opportunities to talk about stuff and give you insights into the sounds that we hear. But when people are asking a lot of questions, it's very difficult for us in the video chats to answer all of those questions. It's a lot easier for me to try to get to everyone's questions if I'm just typing them out over a few hours. So, you know, if you have opinions on that, you can, you know, throw them out there through over the next couple days or so, and maybe Roy and I, as we're browsing the comment stream, we'll try to read those and get a little bit of insight into what you want from this experience. But overall, thanks for joining us today, and we will talk to you soon.